stop denying these victims the justice that they deserve.
This week in Pennsylvania, a sharp rebuke from Governor Shapiro towards Senate Republicans for a stalled amendment that would help survivors of childhood sex abuse. The State Department of Revenue collects taxes, and it spent 50 cents plus labor trying to collect 27 cents from one of our viewers. We'll hear from her. And a federal court tells a Pennsylvania town it cannot tell residents it can't put up political yard sales. Hello and welcome to This Week in Pennsylvania. I'm Dennis Owens. We're covering hot topics in PA policy and politics, as well as the issues that are important to you and your family. Well, the years-long battle to pass a constitutional amendment to let survivors of childhood sexual abuse sue their perpetrators drags on. And this week, Governor Shapiro was asked if it will be a bargaining issue in this year's state budget negotiations. But we thought to recap the long and winding road, we'd put together a little timeline of this saga. It was August 14th of 2018 when then Attorney General Josh Shapiro's grand jury report talked about childhood sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. That caused protests, and in that grand jury report there were recommendations, so a lot of survivors called for legislation. That was a couple of years. Well, let's go to January of 2021. Senate and House both pass amendments. They are identical, and it looks as if a constitutional amendment is within grasp. They both pass it in two separate sessions. That's January. In February, one of the largest uh-ohs in state political history, as the Secretary of State, Kathy Boockvar, failed to properly publicize it. It has to be advertised in newspapers across the state for 90 days. Failed to do that. It is pulled off the ballot. Back into limbo we go. Let's move ahead. 2023, which is the current session that we're in, House and Senate do pass bills. However, they are not identical. The House passes a clean statute of limitations bill. The Senate passes statute of limitations and voter ID and regulatory reform. They are not identical. They are not matching. So let's flash forward even now to today. If it's going to make the February, or I should say, if it's going to make the November 5th ballot, it's got to be advertised again 90 days beforehand. So sometime in August, this thing has to be done. If it is not, it is back to square one and another 2-year wait for survivors.
I think it is shameful, and I've said this many times, that the Senate of Pennsylvania has failed to act, has been unwilling to look these survivors in the eye and pass a statute of limitations window to allow those who have been abused to confront their abusers in a court of law. Instead, they're hiding behind, I guess, the support and largesse of the insurance companies and the insurance lobbyists and the lobbyists for the Catholic Church who don't want them to act. I think that's shameful. It's been 6 years. Other states have acted. Pennsylvania should act too.
Now, the Insurance Federation of Pennsylvania did give us a statement. Says it has always opposed liability retroactivity because it's like changing the rules of the game after the game is over, adding, we insure risk, and once that risk is removed by statute of limitations, there's nothing left to insure. The Catholic Church declined comment. Senate Republicans blamed House Democrats for not passing their version of the amendment, the one that includes voter ID. Well, Dickinson College in Carlisle is graduating its seniors this weekend. Congratulations, class of 2024. But its commencement speaker, Michael Smerconish, was disinvited over words he wrote in 2004 that were considered offensive to Muslim Americans. In the book called Flying Blind, Smerconish criticized the TSA for not profiling young Arab males during airport screenings. He called that prioritizing political correctness over public safety, and doubled down, said he believed that then, still believes it today. Dickinson's president, amidst mild campus protests over Gaza, rescinded Smerconish's invitation to speak. Many of the graduates support that decision. Smerconish does not.
It says that, unfortunately, we're going to yield to the whim of the mob instead of making rationed, adult-like decisions. It also says, who the heck is going to be your next commencement speaker?
I don't think it's appropriate. I think that every student that's graduating here deserves to have a graduation where their dignity is respected, and I think that inviting someone like that would undermine the dignity of a lot of Arab students here, and anyone who really just stands against stuff like that.
Now, we're going to do a much deeper dive in our next segment. Our guest will be, there he is, Michael Smerconish. It is, as we've been telling you and will continue to tell you, a big election year, and lots of you will want to put candidate signs in your yard. Camp Hill, just outside Harrisburg, tried to limit political signs. A federal court just told the borough, well, you can't do that. It stems from the 2022 election, and a few residents with signs in their yards endorsing Republican candidates were told to take them down. One woman was told the ordinance only allows for 2 signs, and she had several. The other woman was told she could only put them up in the last 60 days before an election. Residents and the local GOP sued. They won. The borough appealed. And in the most recent ruling, the residents won again. Judges tipped their hand in the opening sentence of their ruling, which reads, "Rarely may the government limit speech based on its content." It also said in the ruling, Camp Hill had a, quote, "crazy quilt of sign ordinances." I am joined now by attorney Mark Scaringi, who represented the residents, argued the case successfully in federal court. Congratulations on that.
Thank you, Dennis.
Can no town or borough make ordinances to restrict the when and the how many of these signs can be placed? Because some people might say, 48 signs is just making the neighborhood look bad.
No, boroughs certainly can. They can regulate signs as to time, manner, and location. But the regulation has to be uniform and cannot target the sign based upon the message or the speech of the sign.
The borough told us today it has made no decisions whether or not to appeal. They've appealed once and lost. Could they appeal again? And I know you live in Camp Hill as well. As a taxpayer, how do you feel about that? What do you think they should be doing?
Well, I don't think they should take the case any further. They've lost at the district court. They've lost at the appellate court. The next stage would be the United States Supreme Court. They've got to request permission from the Supreme Court for that court to allow their appeal. I don't think they're going to pursue it. I hope they don't.
It tried to argue it was protecting traffic safety and town aesthetics, but the court noted they have no such restrictions on holiday decorations and took a snarky shot saying spooky spirits and skeletons might startle drivers and Rudolph with his nose so bright may blind them, basically almost making fun of them trying to suggest that there was a problem here.
Right. The appellate court said that the borough put forth no evidence to substantiate their need to regulate for traffic safety and aesthetics.
What about planned communities with homeowners associations? Can they make rules about signs?
That's a little bit different because a planned community is not the government, and the First Amendment protects you as an individual from the government regulating your speech, not necessarily private associations.
Lastly, how would you advise them to rework their ordinance so that they could tell people how many signs they can have or not have? Or do you want to bill them at $300 an hour to give you that?
No, I don't want to do that. They just need to make sure that it's a reasonable regulation that doesn't target the message or the speech. That's where they ran afoul of the First Amendment.
Okay. Mark, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Dennis.
it. Well, the next story is about dollars and cents and common sense, which a viewer insists the state is lacking. This is Mary Maslin from Cumberland County. She got a bill from the PA Department of Revenue, the folks that collect taxes, for 27 cents. She saved the envelope, which shows the state paid 50 cents to tell her she owed 27 cents. She wrote the governor a letter, which she copied us on, and she sent the department $1, told them to keep the change. She concluded her letter, "It's good to see the state has not stopped wasting taxpayer money."
It's foolish. Common sense tells you don't send somebody a bill for 27 cents when you spend 50 cents to do it. Plus, they sent a packet that was about this thick with all the papers and everything behind it. So somebody had to assemble that and, put it together and fold it up, put it in an envelope, and mail it. It's a waste.
The Department of Revenue agrees. In a statement, acknowledged that there was a programming error on its end, said some taxpayers were impacted with similar bills, and it said if it's less than $10, no need to respond. Well, coming up, our interview with national commentator and disinvited commencement speaker, Michael Smerconish.
This PA Chamber Minute is paid for by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry.
Pennsylvania has a unique business, tax, and regulatory climate. Yes, uniquely harsh as it continues to stifle our economic growth and opportunity. Wallet Hub recently identified PA as the 4th worst state in the entire country to find a job. And there were 3 separate analyses that found that Pennsylvania was among the bottom third of states nationwide for key economic indicators. As a result, Businesses and people are moving out of the state faster than they are moving in, and they are taking good paying jobs with them. But we can reverse this trend. We can reverse it by adopting tax policies at the state level that prioritize economic growth and make Pennsylvania a more competitive place to do business. Find out more by visiting pachamber.org today.
I think that there's a difference between allowing someone to share ideas that may be unpopular and platforming those ideas, and I think that when you have a commencement speaker or anyone else who's being honored in the way that Smirkonish was going to be, that is platforming rather than just allowing them to speak. It's an endorsement of those ideas.
And that was a graduating Dickinson College student who supported the school's decision to disinvite Michael Smirkonish as its commencement speaker. But late last week, I invited him to speak with me. Anchor, author, analyst, and now disinvited commencement speaker Michael Smirkonish, thanks so much for being with us. What has the reaction been that you've been getting to that disinvitement?
Overwhelming support. Heard from any number of not only Commonwealth leaders, but also alumni of Dickinson. The former governor of the great state of Pennsylvania, Ed Rendell, unsolicited by me, felt obliged to write a letter to the university and tell them what a mistake he thought they had been made. But I just have to say, nearly uniform, Dennis. I've not heard from anybody, candidly. I've not heard from anybody who has said to me they made the right call.
Did any of the students, there were certainly some people calling for it, and there was the editorial, did any of those people reach out to you?
No, none of them reached out to me. When I first heard of the controversy, it was from the president of the university. I don't think that he believed it was going anywhere. And then within the span of 4 or 5 days, it had completely taken a turn.
Speaking of President John Jones, do you have any empathy for the position he's in? You know what happened, of course, to the Penn president, other Ivy League presidents after they testified badly in front of Congress, that you don't want to get sideways and you don't want to take any of this lightly, and maybe now's not the time to really stand up and take a stand given the climate.
I understand that he was in a difficult position, but John Jones knows me. John Jones has known me for decades. John Jones is the one who invited me. John Jones is the one who told me he didn't think it was going to amount to much and that he respected the book that theoretically was at the heart of the controversy. No, he had a different path here, and the path would have been to call me as a gentleman and say, I'm overwhelmed. It's really not about you or your scholarship or work as a journalist. I'd like you to back off, maybe voluntarily, and I will say to the public, it has nothing to do with Michael. But that was never an opportunity given to me.
Speaking about the controversy, some people have said, okay, it's okay to have had those views 20 years ago when you wrote that book, but maybe today they should have evolved, and the fact that you seem to intimate you still stand by it might be seen as offensive or racist.
Dennis, some of the words, they don't age well. This is a book that was written in the immediate aftermath of September 11. I was a whistleblower exposing a Department of Transportation policy that at the time said you can't single out for secondary screening more than 2 individuals of a particular ethnic stripe at any one time. If you apply that to September 11, it means that if you knew that these next 5 passengers, presumed hijackers, were up to no good, you couldn't have done anything about it. I said it was ludicrous then. I believe it to be ludicrous today.
What does it say about where we are in America in terms of speech and on college campuses?
It says that, unfortunately, we're going to yield to the whim of the mob instead of making rationed, adult-like decisions. It also says, who the heck is going to be your next commencement speaker? Because I think that you bestow that honor, and I regarded it as an honor. This would have been my 5th commencement address and honorary degree to someone who's led a life of some achievement. Well, a life of achievement doesn't come from a life lived quietly. So I think it sets a dangerous precedent.
Where do we draw the line, if there is a line, between harmful hate speech that should be shut down and contrarian but intellectual dialogue?
So it's as if Potter Stewart once said about pornography, I think I know it when I see it, but where you don't draw that line is with someone with a hot mic in front of them for 34 years. That's me. 34 years as a broadcaster.
Me
without
too.
incident.
I can relate.
You don't go back and look at a book that was written literally 20 years ago. I had a journalist call me and say, I'm calling about the controversy at Dickinson and the book you wrote in 2014. I said, excuse me, it was 2004 and written in the immediate aftermath of September 11. No, that's not what it looks like.
So Michael Smerconish is disinvited to be the commencement speaker. Why should people who don't know you and don't have a dog in the fight care?
I would hope that they would look at this as a much bigger issue than yours truly or one particular college in Pennsylvania, but instead just try and determine, wait a minute, where are the rights of someone who legitimately, by the way, testified in front of the United States Senate on this very issue, had something to say such that United States Senator Arlen Specter wrote the foreword for my book. If it's gotten to a point where we are so inhospitable to speech that he can't address college students, we got a big problem on our hands.
Well, I think we have a big problem on our hands. We're in the biggest battleground state in America. It's going to be a very contentious election. How do we get past this partisan rancor?
Oh my gosh. You know, I eat, as you do, Dennis, I eat, sleep, and drink this sort of thing. I don't know. I'm sometimes tempted, wishing I were living in one of the 44 or so states that are not going to be the subject of all this focus. I say this to people. And by the way, this was the address. This was the address for those students at Dickinson. Always remember, there's far more, even today, that unites us than divides us. And we can't allow those media influencers, I don't refer to you, or the politicians who are at the extremes, who want to convince us that there's an enormous gulf and divide among us. No. Still much more that binds us together as Americans. And that's what we've got to keep in mind, especially in the next 6 months.
And that was going to be your message?
Absolutely. It was a message titled The Mingle Project, and it was a plea for common experience. Get out of your bubble, get offline, get together in the town square. We can hash it out. Isn't that ironic?
It is ironic. Shouldn't graduating students, though, it is their day after all, have a right to pick who they want and maybe who they don't want to give their commencement speech?
Hey, can I say this to you? There's one thing on which I agree with John Jones. I would never want to be a distraction to these students. I have complete empathy for them. I'm mindful of the fact that 4 years ago they were robbed of high school graduations because of COVID. But at the same time, you can't destroy or attempt to destroy someone's reputation for the sake of maintaining order even at a commencement. And that's what was in the process of happening to me. And thank God I have platforms like yours to set the record straight. I feel for the next person who doesn't have access to the airwaves.
Michael Smerconish, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to speak. Be well.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you for not disinviting me.
Have a great day. Welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. Our political analysts are here with us. Brittany Crampsey, Britt Crampsey Communications, Christopher Nicholas, the Eagle Consulting Group. Okay, is it political correctness run amok with the disinvitation of Michael Smerconish? I thought he was pretty reasoned in his comments there.
Hardly. I also have a very small amount of sympathy for someone who complains about being silenced from the set of their Sirius XM radio show and their podcast and their tens of thousands of Twitter followers and their TV interview. But imagine being a 22-year-old Afghani or Muslim student at Dickinson. You have paid now upwards of $200,000, $250,000 to go to Dickinson. You're essentially a customer of this school. And now, in your big day, your graduation, you are going to have to sit there and listen to someone who said he'd be nervous to sit next to you on a plane. I don't think this is necessarily political correctness run amok, but rather observing the sympathies of some students and honoring them, honoring their dignity on their big day.
I was surprised that it was not handled a little bit more smoothly, given who runs Dickinson these days. I've known Michael Smerconish. We went to competing high schools in the same district. I've known him since he both had hair and was more conservative than me. He is a very thoughtful fellow. He's the exact opposite of a blowhard. I mean, he's a guy, Republican, that famously said he was going to vote for Obama back in the day and, held it up for whatever reason. So, it would have been a refreshing message for these kids to hear as we get them away from their sheltered life in our educational institutions. They go into real life where sometimes you have, waves that crash you into the shore. And, I hope you can give him 10 minutes to listen to his speech.
Isn't it a bit ironic that in a media landscape with hard right and hard left, he's a middle guy and had a message of unity, and that's getting silenced?
Again, I don't think we can say that someone who is on the radio, on TV, on a podcast has been silenced. He hasn't been canceled. He was disinvited from a very small liberal arts college in Pennsylvania. That is not really a human rights crisis here. I think that he might be overblowing the disinvitation.
Ironically, his response to being disinvited got a lot more attention than his speech would have gotten this weekend.
We're going to come right back and talk about, we've got debates, presidential debates on the calendar. We're going to talk about that when we come right back. Welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. More with Christopher and Brittany. We are taking another step toward this big presidential election. We have 2 debates on the calendar, one next month, one in September. What do we make of such an early debate?
Well, look, the candidate who's lagging behind, that's Biden, wants to shake things up. The way you shake things up is you have a debate. He kind of wrapped that invitation to Trump in so much political peanut butter that Trump was eager to kind of scoop it up and eat it and agree to it. So I think Biden got what he wanted, which was an early debate and also no audience. Trump feeds off an audience, so there's no audience. There's going to be 10 people in that room, basically the anchor people and the TV camera folks. So I think those are good things for Biden.
Brittany, does the fact that he's going ahead with a debate in June show that he's been reading the poll numbers and they don't look so good? Like if he had a nice lead, he would just ignore Donald Trump, right?
It might be that, and not even I can deny that the poll numbers are a little bit closer than I'd like to see at this point. But I think this is a great opportunity to remind people who Trump is and what Trump is. He's existed pretty much in a vacuum for the last few years. He has posted to Truth Social. He's held his rallies where he speaks without any criticism.
He's getting network news every night from a courtroom.
He gets network news every night from a courtroom, but he's not being challenged. No, he's not appearing in front of people that are going to go back and forth with him in the public space. This is going to be the contrast that Americans need to see.
You two have both worked with candidates. Is this one that both teams are like, okay, they're on the schedule, and now I'm dreading the thing, and I'm going to be like this watching the whole thing, because you don't know what's going to happen?
Well, I think for the Biden folks, they're worried about how he performs and comes across, given his, vitality, questions about that. If you're Trump, you're worried about what he's going to say. It has been a long time since he has been asked questions. Biden hasn't had a press conference in a long time either. So neither of them had to debate in the primary. So we need more of this.
Last word, Brittany.
I've worked with candidates that I'm more nervous about than Joe Biden. I think we're going to see that he is the compassionate adult in the room, but Trump is a wild card. Who knows what we're going to see? The debate stages he held with Hillary still haunt me, so who knows what we'll get.
Thank you very much. Thank you for watching. Congratulations to all the graduates of 2024, especially over at Dickinson College. We'll see you next week.